Welcome to the Great Firechat, a candid update on the latest in China tech with inside experts Kevin Shimoda and Ade DeSantis.
All right, welcome to the Great Firechat. Here today we got Kevin on this side of this outside of the Great Firewall, and on the inside we got.
Ade DeSantis here in Guangzhou, China, and today we have a special guest.
That's right, Duco. Introduce yourself.
Yes, well, great to be here, guys. My name is
Yes.
Duco. Name and accent is from Holland. Spent 8 years inside the Great Firewall. Escaped about 6 years ago to Australia, Sydney, where I now run a startup incubator.
That's right, and we want to get that's the brief intro, and Duco's really good at keeping it brief. Another person that I really want to learn from. I am very long-winded always. And we kind of, I want to get today. We're going to get the whole intro from Duco. He's done some really interesting stuff. I actually went and sat down with him for a very long-winded and excellent. What was that? A lunch, a breakfast? That was a lunch, right?
I think you had a big breakfast. So I think it was sort of like it was a brunch.
It was like a brunch. Okay, yeah.
It was
one of my first face-to-faces of like any business aspect of the past like 2 or 3 years. It was lovely is what it was. And I got to hear Duco's life story. He'll probably give you one a little more succinct here. He's done a lot of cool stuff with China. He's done a lot of cool different things, which is just always interesting to hear. So we want to hear Duco's China story. I want to hear Duco giving your story of how you started leading a co-working space, which became an incubator here in Australia, and then how you got into NFTs. And what did you do? Just to give like a little bit of a spoiler to keep it all interesting, I think you did the largest NFT event in Sydney.
That's right, Australia. Yeah,
in Australia. And I've been talking to some Web3 investors. I'm getting more into the Web3 space, and a lot of them are saying Sydney, Australia has a very prolific and strong Web3 ecosystem. So saying you did the biggest NFT event in Australia is saying something, because commonly doing the biggest thing in Australia isn't saying much. Let's be honest. But Web3 is pretty big here, so it is saying something. I'm probably crapping on Australia too much. I've only been here for 3 years. I don't know if I'm allowed to do that yet.
Yeah, you can forget about your passport now.
Yeah, that PR is going to be denied really quick. Ade, but before it goes in, Ade, you want to say anything?
I just, it's really great to meet Duco. We were chatting before we started recording. And I'm super interested to hear because I have not heard these stories. I was not able to meet you guys for lunch in Sydney, which sounds absolutely lovely.
It's really nice.
So I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit about that and chatting NFTs.
Sounds good.
All right, Duco, give us your spiel. Or the beginning, at least.
Shall I start from my childhood?
Yeah, start from birth. Why did they name you Count Duco? Why is it Count Duco? Like, is that?
Well, so here's the interesting thing. So I at one point asked my mother, and I was like, "Hey, what's up with the weird name? Like, I haven't
So what's up with that?
The only other time I met a Duco, it was a dog. And it was like, come here. And I was like, how dare you talk to me? And it was like, oh, it's a dog.
Oh, okay. Come here, Duco. Come down, Duco. Down.
And at some point I thought, you know what? I'll Google it, right? And it turned out that my name it stands for the leader of a pack of wolves. And I was like, oh wow, shit, Mom, you put a lot of thought into it. And she was like, no, I had no idea. It's like, okay. Oh.
I like it.
So there goes that story. But
that's so good. Maybe that's where a lot of your innovation and out of the box thinking comes from.
Yeah, man. Leadership abilities. Innate.
Leadership abilities.
I was born that way. So.
Leader of the alpha pack.
the alpha wolf. But yeah, no. But by way of background, so yeah, born and raised in the Netherlands. My first entrepreneurial venture was web design when I was 11.
Wow, really? I don't even remember that part.
Yeah, it was basic stuff, HTML.
He's like fiddling uterine.
well, and then I decided to pivot my career, and I started importing moped parts from Eastern Germany, East
Yeah.
Germany, and
What was
selling
this?
them in
When was this
Holland.
pivot? Is this 12?
This was like 15.
Oh
Yeah,
my god.
I bought my first actual moped that I could ride when I was 16.
I told you he was interesting, Otto. Did I not say he was interesting?
That's pretty cool.
He's
That's
a
pretty
good
cool.
one. He's
Then
ridiculous.
I moved out when I was I graduated high school when I was 16. Moved out to the big city, which was like all the way on the other side of the country, which is like an hour and a half drive. For you Americans, that's nothing. For
Yeah.
us, it was like, holy shit.
Yeah. I'm good. I'm
Parents crying.
further from the Shire than I've ever been in my life.
It's actually how it felt like. And people were like,
Yeah.
oh my God, he's gone now. It's like
Yeah.
he's left us. And I was like, yeah, I'm in a big city now.
Yeah.
That's like 400,000 people, right?
Yeah.
So studied there, and then eventually I
Sorry, what city was this? Was this Amsterdam?
The Hague.
Oh,
So
okay,
this
you went to The Hague.
This is
Okay.
like the Canberra of
okay.
for
Yeah.
any international
Den Haag.
listeners. You know, yeah, Den Haag.
International court.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's what we're known for.
Cool place.
Yeah.
So I went there and did some study, hated it. Then at some point I was like, okay, after a year of that, or 3/4 of a year, I was like, what the hell am I going to do with my life?
Yeah.
I hate my studies. And I decided to travel for a little bit.
Yeah.
So I went to Thailand. And that's where I found this really cool product. And it was like soap, sort of flowers made out of soap from the north in Chiang Mai. I was like, that's cool.
Yeah.
So then I started importing that and selling that in Holland. Did okay. Gave out shares to friends, to buy the initial quantity.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Then,
so it's shares of the company.
Yeah.
You're selling equity at like age 20 or something.
Yeah. Like, what was it?
It's amazing.
Yeah. 18.
Yeah.
And then, anyways, at some point, I was doing my studies, and I thought, oh, this is a bit boring.
Yeah.
I wanted to do something different. I wanted to study abroad. Always had this sort of appetite to
Right.
explore new countries. So I went to my dean, and they're like, yeah, of course you can study abroad. What about Milan? And I was like, nah, come on. Like half the countries going there. I want to go somewhere else. I want to go to Asia. And they're like, Asia? Yeah, sorry, can't help you there. It's like we have nothing there.
Yeah.
So eventually,
Never heard of it.
Never heard of it.
Yeah.
Well, a little bit, right? We have a little bit of history in, say, Indonesia.
Yeah, Indonesia. I know. Yeah,
just a few hundred years of history.
You guys kind of ran that
a little bit, for just 300 years or so.
Yeah,
but,
no big.
But we left.
And then you went back to your flowers.
That's right. But yeah, long story short, I cut a deal with them. And the deal was I'll go and find my own place to study. In this case, I decided on China because I thought China's kind of cool and new, and I didn't know anyone that's ever been there. It's communist. So I was like, that sounds like an adventure. But also there was a lot of business happening there. So decided to go to China, and in return for not having to pay any fees and being able to accelerate my studies, essentially, I just had to, A, go to a university there, and B, build a relationship with one or more universities there to build a potential student exchange program, which was, basically what I did. And in exchange, they could also use me as a bit of a marketing prop to show how international they were. Right.
Awesome.
So that's how I got to China. I enrolled in a university in Hangzhou, Zhejiang University, which I just found online because I thought it was a cool city. And actually loved it. So, and that 1 year sort of snowballed into 8 years, and I eventually left in 2016.
Wow.
God, that's how China.
That's an incredible story.
You never went back after that 1 year study abroad, did you?
I did. I did.
Went back, finished, and then.
Exactly. So I went back for about 10 months. And in those 10 months, I finished 2 years of university and wrote my thesis, which was horrible. It was pretty intense.
Just a time out here, just to take a step back, because I think I always like the question of kind of what's your China story, and I just think that everyone's like people like Ade and I that are, Ade is has actual Chinese ethnic history where I just have no history, and it's like what drew you to China is always an interesting question because you went there, it was amazing, you stayed there. What was it that drew you there? What kind of kept you in more from like that?
Well, what drew me there was the mystery, right?
Yeah.
I thought there was the mystery. The sort of like I didn't know anyone that had been there.
Yeah.
It's communist, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, what's that like?
Dude, right?
And it was up and coming from a
Yeah.
business point of view. People
Yeah.
started talking about it. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. But also, I kind of like, well, I had never been there, but I was like, oh, it must be quite spiritual as well,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
Buddhism and whatnot is
Totally.
quite big there. Well, obviously, I learned slightly different when I got there.
Yeah. 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 It's kind of yeah. It's kind of not spiritual.
Yeah, it's kind of not.
It's like that's not allowed.
It's a little bit harder
sometimes.
to find.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Totally.
But anyways, that's sort of I went in blind, and was pleasantly surprised when I got there.
Yeah.
And as to what kept me there was, I don't know. I think the energy. China was sort of moving from the factory of the world to one of the largest consumer markets. People were looking forward to tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right. And everything was growing and everyone was working on something. It was very entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
I was like, holy shit, I want to be part of this growth story.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I sort of stuck around.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that sounds really familiar too. I mean, it's very, very similar to my experience when I arrived. And the reason why I decided to say, but I arrived way back in 2001.
Wow.
Yeah. But it was very similar to that sense of mystery. It's like I really knew nothing about it. And what Kevin was referring to is that my grandparents on my mom's side, both of them were born in Guangzhou. And then they left China in the 40s.
Wow.
And so they had not been to China for 60 years. And they were and they took care of me. They were my main caretakers when I was a baby growing up until when I was about 10 years old.
Wow.
And so they would tell me about China. They would tell me the stories of their childhood and them growing up. And my grandpa would always tell me about his father, who had 5 wives. He had 24 siblings. And everything just sounded so interesting and so different and so foreign. And we knew nothing about it. We weren't getting any news from there. We weren't getting any we just had no idea what was happening. So
Totally.
I really wanted to go see.
And then when I got honest, was the main drawing card the 5 wives?
5 wives.
Was that
polygamy?
I was relatively sure that was no longer a thing, but I had to find out for myself.
Yeah. When did that bubble pop? He was like, "Oh no, it's not allowed anymore." I think polygamy is actually not legally allowed because it was it's because there's certain minorities that will want to have that as a part of their culture.
Yeah. But when I got here and just like you, it's like, oh, this is what's happening. It's very different from what I expected. Like that growth story. When the way you said it, which is I want to be part of this growth story, that was almost exactly what was going through my head.
Right.
It was there's no reason to go anywhere else. Right now, this is where it's at.
Yeah. For me, just really quick, kind of riding on the back of that, and I think Duco does a really good job describing it. When I would visit China, the first time was 2009, and I was there for a year. And during that year, I saw all these changes to the neighborhood I was in, which was just outside of Beijing Daxue or Beijing University and Tsinghua, and like shops are exploding, becoming really popular, and then closing down, and then rebuilding, and then a big buildings going up, and all this stuff is happening. And then I go home after that year, and nothing has changed. There was a time in the middle. Yeah. I was there for 4 months. I did a trip for a month. I did a trip for like 2-3 weeks with my family during the winter holidays, and then I went back. And during those 3 weeks, like 2 shops that I knew of had closed down, and other ones had opened. There was this like intense change in 3 weeks' time to the kind of geography of the city. And I would go back home and a year goes by, like 5 years go by, and one new store has opened, maybe one has closed. But just like when you're in Beijing and like everywhere in China, that just things are closing and opening. There's so much churn. There's so much excitement. Just like Duco's saying, there's this huge economic miracle happening, and everyone's excited about tomorrow. Yeah. So Duco, tell us more about your story from there. So
yeah. Sure. Yeah. So I got to Hangzhou there. studied a bit, did a master's degree at a British university, and then in Ningbo, and then I started working with Chinese companies. So
Yeah.
I was the sort of typical white monkey sort of
Yeah.
roles.
Yeah. Totally.
But it was a good role though, because
Yeah.
I had a private driver and my own glass office, and I
Yeah.
was responsible for local government relations essentially, which
That's
was
crazy.
Wow, that's
That seems like the
interesting.
last job you should get. That seems like the
Yeah.
last job.
the interview consisted out of me showing that I could drink. That was like literally, they literally wanted me to prove that I could drink. And the boss lady brought one of her friends with her, and he would drink with me. And at the end, he fell off his chair, and I could still somewhat look straight and carry him into the car. And that's
Oh
how
my
I got the
god.
job. And I was like, this is the most Chinese sort of story you can come up
the
with, right?
The private driver makes a lot of sense when you give that background. You're like
Because
someone to
that's,
drive you home, to cart your intoxicated body home safely.
yeah, and that was definitely necessary
Yeah.
quite regularly, because that was, old school China business was
Yeah.
drinking and smoking a lot and building relations. So
Especially in this is in Ningbo, or where did you get your
this was
job?
in Hangzhou.
Hangzhou, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Because if you're in Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, those start to phase. I think those start to
yeah,
phase out like 2010. But those still exist in Hangzhou. Is still considered more tier two,
yeah.
despite Alibaba's massive influence. Um, so yeah, okay, gotcha. And
But
then
that
yeah, and
was not sustainable, right?
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I
And
just
then
looked like crap
and then
after
what
a year.
happens next? You're kind of doing that role, and then what happens?
Yeah, so then I started working for Dutch companies.
Yeah.
So I helped a large fashion enterprise set up shop there.
A nice, a
Um,
health. This sounds like a healthy change. A healthy
Health, yeah,
change.
was very healthy change actually, very healthy change. Um, and then I was recruited to work for a Dutch firm in Shanghai.
Mm,
And basically, these were a bunch of entrepreneurs who were very successful in China. I had hundreds of employees working for them in a variety of different businesses, from water technology businesses to owning the largest flower production company to product development and sourcing businesses. You name it, they had it. And I said, look, there's increasingly more companies coming to us that want to set up shop in China. Um, and well, we're not interested in being consultancy, but what we could do is work with them and introduce new technologies into the market, where we can add value beyond simply the market entry piece, but potentially localize their manufacturing or co-invest with them, because we have all these existing distribution channels and offices and licenses. So we'd be the perfect partner for them. Can you set that up for us? Can you sort of turn this idea on a paper napkin into an actual business? And that's sort of what I did for a couple of years, where we had some successes, some failures, as you do. Got
as
tired of it.
as a guy that started his first company at 11 years old, I could see how you would be good at starting kind of companies and these new business ventures.
I try,
Yeah.
wasn't a recipe for success
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
um, but eventually, I just had health issues and
Yeah.
I needed a bit of a change. And I
Yeah.
got to Australia to visit a cousin of mine, and rolled into this job.
Mm,
And Haymarket HQ, the company I currently run, was set up by Brad Chan, and he's
mm.
the CEO of a family-owned business and a large family office here. Third generation Chinese Australian, doesn't speak a word of Mandarin.
Nice.
And he said, look, we're setting up an Asia innovation hub with a co-working space, which was like revolutionary at the time. Is that something you're interested in setting up with me, and we can sort of see how we go? And I was like, yeah, that sounds like fun, a bit
And
random.
that's like at the start of the WeWork boom, right? That's
Yeah,
where
that's
WeWork.
right.
That's like like a year and a half before WeWork
WeWork,
peaks.
WeWork just entered the market.
Right.
I still remember they were constructing some building close to
Yeah.
where I
Yeah.
ended up living. And they just hired a country manager who happened to be a Dutch guy as well,
Yeah. It's so funny.
who came from the co-working industry, from a sort of startup, the co-working space, to
Yeah.
then leading WeWork. So then I got the gig here. I built up a small team, and work with our advisory board to really build up the place. And offering, and it's a lot of fun working with all these tech startups, helping them raise funding,
Yeah.
helping them expand into new markets. That led to government advisory, that led to large, like creating large virtual programs to help tech companies expand into new markets, which led me to set up a small family office to invest in tech companies,
Cool.
which eventually got me to Web3. And I fell down the NFT rabbit hole hard, as you know.
Yeah.
And I started selling pictures of Kim Jong-un online for crypto. So as you do.
As you do.
Okay, that was a
As you
few
do.
jumps. I love that. I like it. Well, so it sounds like Duco, you are just the guy that just makes companies and just makes business models, and you just keep going from country to country, igniting new innovative ideas, and that's kind of the role you ended on in when you were in China with this Dutch company. But I feel like that Dutch company, it sounds like it was a little limiting. You're like, go ahead and help them do anything as long as they partner with us, and it's kind of sometimes that's really limiting. You're like, we're down to do something, but you have to partner with us or invest with us or something like that. Otherwise, I can't work with you. That's actually pretty limiting in the types of people that you can do that with. Whereas when you're Haymarket HQ, at that place, you're an incubator. I mean, the sky's the limit. You're just helping all these things just launch.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
are
which
you
is a lot of fun.
in your are you is it it turns in it sounds like you kind of said I can't remember if you said this on the recording or not, but it turns into an incubator. Do you feel like do you start to feel like you're advising and you want to be on one of these projects? Is there like,
Yeah,
how does
for
that
sure.
go for a while? Do you get kind of sick of just watching these things fly by and you're like, God, I want to be on that team. I want to ride that project. I want to ride that wave.
Yeah, for sure. I think especially if you're a bit entrepreneurial, that's always in the back of your mind, right?
Yeah.
Um, but there's also an addictive side to being on the sidelines because you
Mm,
get to see all of them. And let's face it, in
mm,
the end, startups, 95% of them don't make it,
right.
right? So on one hand, you want to jump into one. On the other hand, you kind of want to stay on the sidelines.
Yeah.
Um, it's
You can't fail from the sidelines. Like you
Yeah, but
can't, there's
that's
nothing
actually, yeah. Well,
you can't.
you still
You
can,
can
trust me.
Yeah,
keep
true.
You're
picking the
still
wrong
running a
ones.
business.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
But I guess that's a good point. Yeah, you can't really feel from the sidelines.
Yeah.
So then that sort of, I think, somewhat. I love the entrepreneurial side, but I can also be an anxious person.
Yeah,
So
totally.
sometimes standing on the sideline is the safe thing to do, but it's not always a good thing to do.
Yeah, right. So okay. So we put that behind us. Now, what's up with Kim Jong Un in your NFT project? So how did
You
that
mean
come
our
about?
dear leader?
Yeah, our
Yes.
dear. I apologize. The supreme leader, our dear leader.
Yeah. So
So this is you throwing your hat in the rink finally, right? Is that kind of what this was, or
a little bit. I mean,
yeah,
I already set up a little migration technology company which was really cool. But then the borders closed to Australia, so that migrant pool dried up. Talk about timing.
yeah,
But yeah, I came across NFTs, and I always loved sort of tinkering around with basic fun ideas. It's something that puts a smile on my face that I can do as a hobby next to my job,
yeah,
and that's how it started on a Friday night here at work, with a few drinks and a fun idea.
yeah.
And it was based on these certificates, title certificates you can buy from the UK. I don't know if you've seen them, but there are title certificates like a lord. You could call it, so you could call yourself a lord or a duke, And I
I
thought it
think
was genius.
did I tell you I have one of those? Did I tell you that?
I think you did
I
actually.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am one of those suckers. I was like just looking around. I have it here somewhere.
But
I am
there,
a
it
lord.
was so smart. It's
It's
some
so
guy in
stupid.
the UK that was like, "Hey, certain parcels of land come with title rights," and he figured, well, I can sell a square inch of that, and then that person that buys it, essentially, then also becomes a title holder, right?
Right.
And it became a whole online business, and I started looking into it, and I was like, "Shit, these guys are selling a ton of these certificates, making real money out of it, and it's the
It
stupidest thing you can come
and it's
up with."
what I really like about it is that it just plays to my vanity, plays to one's vanity. I was like, oh, I can be a lord, heck yeah. And
Right?
then when my brain starts going, what the heck am I actually doing? Why am I paying $25-$50 just so I can be called a lord legally in Scotland or something like that? However awesome that is.
Yeah.
But what they do is they go, you're buying a square meter of land in Scotland, which protects that forest land, so it protects the environment. You are a part of creating a private
I
green
even forgot
park,
about that. That's a good point.
which is really cool. So I was like, God, this is so stupid. This is so stupid. And it's like, but actually, you're protecting a green park so that it can be a nice green space. But
Yeah.
that's me just defending myself. What am I?
But that's no, but that's just, but I thought it was genius, right? And I thought
Yeah.
it was funny.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, but do I want to have a lordship certificate? I was like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of cool, but all these folks already have it. I'd like to be special, like my name. And I thought, who has the best titles of them all? And that's how I got to our dear leader, Kim Jong.
Ah.
So I don't know if you've ever looked up the titles that the North Korean leadership have held, but it's the most ridiculous shit you'll ever see. So, for instance, his father, Kim Jong Il, had the title, not only the title of Iron-Willed Commander, which I think is pretty cool,
Iron Will Commander.
Iron-Willed Commander,
Oh my God.
but also my personal favorite, he had the title Master of the Computer Who Surprised the World.
What?
How can you beat that?
Where does that even come from?
Like,
Oh my
honestly,
God.
the stuff you see, like
Oh my
guiding
God.
sun ray, it's just unbelievable. And they actually refer to them as such, in state media. And I was like, yeah, I want to be an iron-willed commander. I want to be the master of the computer who surprised the world. Who cares about being a duke if you can be an iron-willed commander, right? So I thought,
Wow.
why not start selling North Korean title certificates? I can become the official distributor of North Korean title certificates. Who's going to stop me, really?
Yeah.
Travel here, good luck. So,
Right.
I'm looking at these titles. I just went to the Wikipedia of list of Kim Jong Il titles,
yeah,
and they are amazing. They are
that's right.
amazing.
So,
There's some really good ones. It was ever victorious, iron-willed leader, and then there was just amazing politician. It's just
yes.
I love
I
it.
actually have the domain name amazingpolitician.com.
Mastermind of the revolution.
I was like, at some point, I'll sell that to
Kim
our
Jong-il.
beloved Trump.
Yeah,
You know?
Brian Beloved. Yeah, right.
But yeah, so I was like, yeah, that's cool. And then I thought, oh yeah, this is the perfect use case for a non-fungible token, for an NFT, right? Like,
Right.
Yeah.
it's immutable, it's on the blockchain. And then I started seeing all these pictures of apes being sold for millions, and I was like, oh yeah, well, with that certificate, maybe we can also have a little picture.
Yeah.
And that's how the Kimmies was born. So thekimmies.com,
Oh my
where we
God.
sell North Korean title certificates. So you basically get an NFT. It's a picture of Kim Jong-un. It's unique. It's computer generated, created by an artist and computer generated. And you get a title with that as well. So if you buy it, you get that image, you get that title, and you can go onto our website. You can log in using your NFT, and then it can generate an official title only you would have, and you'll see also all the attributes that NFT has. So, for instance, we hid a few Easter eggs in there that you cannot see.
Wow.
For instance, you could have Kim Jong-un that is vaccinated with a particular vaccine, or maybe he doesn't need a vaccination because he's a baller and he has juche, which is spirit. So, we kind of went down that rabbit hole because almost every attribute that he has as well. For instance, you can see him wearing a jumper, it looks like an Adidas jumper, because when he went to international school, and I think it was in Geneva, as a child, he would only wear that jumper. So every little attribute has a bit of cultural relevance to it.
So it's all like historically accurate titles. It's like fact-based, historically based
The titles are
concepts
real.
of art. Yeah, and titles. Yeah, the title was one of my favorites. I just saw on the Wikipedia page. Great man who is a man of deeds.
Yes, we have. Good. Actually, if you want to know what kind of leader you are, you can go onto our website, and there's the title quiz.
So that's so good.
To find out,
that's like what Disney princess you are. It's like what
what
Kimmy
kind of dictator are you?
What Kimmy are you? Oh,
Yeah.
that's good. And is this a project you're still? I hadn't even gone to the website. It's really great. It's very lovely. I love the art. It's very NFT-esque.
Yeah, no. So that's something that we sold a few hundred of them. It wasn't like by any means a sellout major success, but
Yeah,
because it's obviously a bit of a niche market.
yeah,
Um, but also, it led to some really interesting opportunities.
yeah.
So the highest grossing street artist in Australia found them and thought, this is pretty cool. So then we started collaboration with him. And that then led to us working together to organize a large a large NFT art conference that lasted for 3 weeks in collaboration with
Okay.
HTC and all kinds of Wacom and all kinds of other brands. Um, that led to us being featured in national media in the largest newspaper in Australia. So it was all completely random, and it all started with the idea of can we start selling these ridiculous titles from North Korea?
I like that it started from you having beers because it's like it's a loop of your career with China. You started off drinking
That's true.
beers, and now you're doing another Asia focused project inspired by having some beers. I find so did you originally have a business model? I personally, this is like putting in my bias. I find that my favorite ideas are just like I just want to do them for the fun of it,
Hmm.
like it's this project is just full of, when you go to the website you can just tell it's just full of fun, like it's just a good time, all historically and factually accurate. I have a really good friend named David, who I'm going to send this episode, and I'm going to send this. He loves North Korea. He
Oh,
loves, like, he's in Seattle. He's married to a Japanese wife, and he like loves Asia, and he loves Japan because he loves like kind of how weird certain parts of like how like Japanese culture can be, where it's like, I don't know, like they have like a certain spoon for this and a certain spoon for things that we would just never consider. That's a weird example. I just
that's
randomly
probably
made
because
up.
you're American, right? Because you guys aren't very used to those things there.
We just we don't specialize with it. And we're
So
barbarians.
they have like
Um,
spoons and forks there, and
yeah, who knows?
crazy people.
We
Hands.
just
We
eat
just
with
use
our
our
hands.
hands.
We just eat burgers.
That's it.
But yeah, he like loves North Korea because it can be so weird. And he visited and he got like this alcohol, our dear leader alcohol from North Korea, and he just
Oh.
like has read biographies about it, and he's just so fascinated by how weird that culture can become. Um, and this is your NFT project is a testament and an ode to a fringe country like North Korea.
And it's done some good. Like
Yeah.
we donated a few grand to Liberty in North Korea as well, which is
Mm,
a charity supporting North Korean refugees.
Hmm.
so cool.
It's a bit of fun, but it yeah turned out to be a little bit more work than we had anticipated, but a
Yeah,
lot
I'm
more
sure.
fun too.
I'm sure. Yeah, and so how is that project going now? Like, are you still continuing? What's next for Duco? And then we can kind of move into some more current events and try to get your spin on NFTs and talk about NFTs more in general.
Sure. Yeah, so it's still going on in the background, but obviously the recent downturn in the market hasn't helped.
Right, NFTs has kind
I
of
think
crashed.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
like it's down by what 95% or so.
Wow.
And it was never meant to be a full time sort of gig.
Yeah.
So it's sort of running still in the background, and we're looking at what to do next.
Yeah.
We're thinking of rebooting the most famous, one of the best games in history that I'm sure you've heard of. It's called Pyongyang Racer. It's the only game that's ever come out of North Korea.
Oh my
Yeah,
god.
I know. And
Wow.
we're thinking of putting up Pyongyang Racer 2.
Oh my
So
gosh. 2.0.
it's the long-awaited sequel. So
The great
um,
game of great
the
deeds.
greatest game of all games.
Yeah.
Um,
There can be a lot of
They only needed to make one game. Like
the
they
copy
made the
writes
greatest
itself.
game. Yeah.
it's you should Google it. It's quite something.
Oh my god.
It's got quite an interesting history behind it. Actually, it was set up by a British travel company based in China in partnership with a North Korean firm. So it's a bit
Wow.
random.
I
But
should
yeah,
connect you with my friend David. I think he knows more about North Korea than a lot of people. He's okay. Yeah. So maybe that might be in the works. And what else is
Yes.
going on?
Well, that's the key thing when it comes to
Yeah.
NFTs, really.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, here at HQ, we're
Yeah. You still
constantly.
got your Haymarket HQ gig.
That's right. So
Yeah.
we're sort of exploring what's next as
Yeah.
well. Obviously, co-working space isn't as popular as it used to be
Right.
as a result of COVID. Um, it really shook up the entire commercial real estate industry.
Mm.
Um, and there's obviously some interesting macroeconomic trends that are affecting the tech scene as well. So
Mm.
being in the tech startup sector is an interesting place to be. I think it's always a few steps ahead of the normal economy, I guess you could
Mm.
say.
Mm.
Blockchain is again a few steps ahead of Web 2,
Mm.
simply because they're really pushing the boundaries in terms of tech
Totally.
and innovation, but
Totally.
also they're the riskiest asset classes. So
I was
the
gonna
first
say, in
thing,
terms of regulation as well, like
oh yeah, that's
it's
a
like
whole
those things
different,
aren't
yeah.
even they're not illegal, but they're not legal either.
Oh
There's
yeah,
just like
there's
unclassified.
there's a lot of illegal stuff, and I think
Yeah.
the US is sort of actively now prosecuting folks as well that
Yeah.
use
Yeah.
funny games in the crypto space.
Yeah.
But you can sort of see what's happening in crypto, or Web 2 and Web 3, whatever terms you want to use. And you usually see it happen there first before you start to see it happen in the real world economy, so to say.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're seeing in crypto as well, that obviously fell off a cliff. But Web 2 is also just in Web 2 being your simple tech companies. They've obviously seen a few challenges as well in this past year. I mean, look at Netflix alone, that lost almost 70% of its value.
Yeah.
And then you look at all the private tech companies that are shedding staff.
Mm.
So funny times to be in this tech space.
Yeah. So, Duco, I wanted to ask, from your position as head of an incubator, I do, follow Y Combinator, and I enjoy seeing all the companies that come through there year after year
Mm.
after year, and you can kind of see the trends over time. As
Yeah.
fintech builds up, and then as Web3 builds up, you see more and more companies that provide those kinds of services or those kinds of solutions. So I was just wondering, from your perspective, if you could give us some insight into what do you see out there? What are the trends? What's coming next?
Yeah, I mean, it changes every year or so, really. I remember when I first started working in all this, a lot of it was around robotics and
Mm-hmm.
AI, machine learning was going to change the world, and we'd all be out of jobs. 4 years ago by now already. Deep tech had a bit of a thing going, and nobody really understood what the hell deep tech was. And then we're like, oh,
Right.
maybe it's ag tech, so agricultural tech became
Right.
a thing. Feed the world, new
Okay.
proteins. Let's mash up insects and turn them into hamburgers.
I
That
love
sort of
that.
thing. That's still
Let's
going
do it.
strong. So there's a lot happening in that sort of food space and
Right.
localizing manufacturing through vertical farms, so that
Right.
you can turn
I remember
old,
that.
you can turn
I
old
remember
basements
that.
into farms. So that's still ongoing.
Yeah.
Fintech has been a big one here, and
Mm.
you often see it really depends on the country and market, right?
True.
So it's big here is because the financial sector is massive in Australia, way bigger
Right.
than you see in most other countries. The banks here are just insanely big, and there's a lot of innovation happening in that space. So that's continued on, and more recently we've seen obviously a lot in Web3, and Web3, is a bit of an excuse for investors as well, for the VCs to throw money at the next big thing, because a lot of these
Mm-hmm.
big trends, it's an excuse for investors to throw money at. They constantly
Right.
have to find new, exciting things to talk to people about and say, this is where you should invest in.
Right.
So recently, I think it's all been Web3, and particularly within Web3, decentralized autonomous organizations like DAOs,
Mm-hmm.
where people pool money together and make joint decisions on how to spend that money, and usually invest it into companies. And that's where I see a lot of the activity happening now.
Oh, okay.
Obviously, it's dying off a little bit here and there, because I think the crypto market has lost something around $2 trillion, and it was worth about $3. So, slight decrease in value there. But it's a very, very interesting industry. And I think if you move away the hype, which is about 99% of the stuff that you're reading, and focus on what the hell does it actually do, and what applications in Web3 or blockchain, I should say, are 10 times better than in Web2, that's when you get to the real interesting stuff. And
So,
usually that's in the form of provenance and record keeping, right? So turning bank guarantees onto the blockchain and use smart contracts to sort of make that a lot faster. Right? So you see the big banks investing in that here, which is quite interesting to see. You talk to the stock exchanges, and they have distributed ledger technology. And one interesting thing here is the New South Wales government, so the state here in Australia, has started experimenting with blockchain, where new buildings, I don't know how, so they just announced this. Victor Dominello, I think he's the Minister of Innovation or something, in small business or small and jobs. He, together with KPMG Horizons, they launched an initiative that tracks every supplier of new apartment buildings, so that if you buy an apartment, and a lot of new apartment buildings in Australia were crap and had cracks in them, and there's all kinds of problems associated with these new apartments. So this new technology that tracks it all, so that you can see who were the suppliers, who supplied all these building materials, who built the building, all that sort of jazz. So there's complete transparency around that. It's early days, but it's interesting to see some of these technologies really coming in.
At the government level, right?
Yeah,
Not even because it's like the U.S. I mean, the U.S. is like the big tech companies that are taking Web3 seriously is just starting to happen, and those are the people at the forefront. Then the banks are kind of far behind, and then the last would be the government. In Australia, you had I recall you talking about the banks and how they're really big. ANZ, Australia, New Zealand Bank. It's a really big one. You'd recognize the logo if you don't.
NAB, Combank, all of them.
They're really big. In ANZ, it was like 5 years ago. Did a blockchain project around real estate. It was more of a proof of concept. I can't recall how much they've actually initiated it, but the idea was it was to do with escrow and real estate property purchasing.
Okay.
Ade should know a lot about escrow because he does actually auctions. But the idea that you would hold on to money because banks hold on to money as a $1 million real estate is being purchased, and then during the transfer, and they actually set up some kind of a blockchain solution for that. And that was 4 or 5 years ago, and this is one of the huge banks, so pretty innovative. And then the government already doing it is amazing. Actually, just kind of a tangential subject, but just I'm frequently impressed by the Australian government when it comes to technology. Just when it comes to everything services. As an American, as an American, we pride ourselves in being very laissez-faire, capitalist. The right wing would kind of pride ourselves in paying low taxes, small government, but then the government just isn't super functional, and we have this the Department of Vehicles, or DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, is like always ripped at and joked as the gateway to hell, because you're in there and there's 50 people and you're in line for 4 hours and they call it a number, and it's just, and you get up there and you might be at the wrong place after waiting for 4 hours, or you just don't have the right document. You step into, this is a big tangent, you step into the New South Wales services, and it's like, it feels like one of those, like a Scientologist place. Like someone greets you, it's like all beautiful. Someone greets you at the door and they're like, what did you come in to do? Okay. Do you have, you want to register a vehicle? Do you have these files? Because that's what you need when you get up to the front. Okay, you do. I've triaged that. Here's your ticket. Now you're waiting. You're in the right place. Or, you can do that online at one of our 4 computers over there. Tell me when you're ready and I'll come over and help you. And they
that's really nice.
It's amazing. So that's offline, but they've like kind of synced that with online. But they have this MyGov, which is a national level, and then they have my New South Wales, my NSW apps. and they have these apps with government services that all get linked, and they all link to all of the national, state level, and national level services. And actually, they start to look a lot like a super app. And it's actually something I haven't really talked about because I haven't really been on the phone, or I haven't really been in a conversation with someone at the business level, like the career level, who lives in Australia and knows these things. But when I'm thinking about super app what examples, uh, it's hard to find them in the West. You like Facebook, all of this is really focused on a few use cases. But right now, you got MyGov and you got New South Wales, and you can do so many things with it, like register your vehicle, and then you get you can see you tie it to your driver's license, so you can pull up your driver's ID, and now they have a virtual driver's ID that pulls up in your my New South Wales app, which is what WeChat was doing when I was leaving WeChat. They were trying to make a digital
Yeah.
license, and putting government services in there. They can do a lot of different things, but what really started to impress me was when they gave out, and you'll remember this, Duco, this is really recent, the US to incentivize spending sent checks to every household. And I'm here in Australia, and I get 1,300 US dollars from Donald J. Trump. And I'm like, what the heck is this? And they mailed it to me in Australia. I've registered my address because I still pay US taxes. And the idea is that it's going to increase spending in the United States and help the US economy. And I'm just getting 1,300 US dollars while living in Australia. And I'm like, what the heck is this? What this is like Keynesian economics, like we could argue about it. I just think it's really weird. Just give people money and they'll spend it. But like, I mean, you could just go spend it on drugs. Like who knows? And they just give you cash. What New South Wales did, and Audie, this will be interesting for you, is they gave people vouchers. And what were they called? They're like
Dine and Discover
Dine and Discover.
vouchers.
So they
Yeah.
try to get people to go back outside, dine, go eat, or discover entertainment. And these vouchers are given to people in the My New South Wales app. And
Nice.
this is digital currency. This is digital money
Yeah.
that the government is providing to people. It's like I've never seen it really discussed on any tech board, and it's incredible. It's digital money that the government's providing to people. And this is so on the national level. This is the national ledger of Australia is disseminating money, and it's given to the people to then be redeemed at businesses which have registered with Dine and Discover. And you get $100, and then later on they give another $100, and it was $100, but it was in 4 vouchers to Dine, to Discover.
Yeah.
Use them at restaurants or use them at entertainment places. Get people to go out and do things and help the struggling restaurant economy and struggling entertainment economy as everyone just stays inside and watches Netflix. That for me was incredible. I was flabbergasted by how, and then it all operates on QR codes,
Yeah.
on redeeming, and it's every government or all these businesses that have seemingly pretty easily, you would kind of, maybe you would know, but it seems pretty easy because I see some pretty small mom and pop shop even run by people that don't speak, like a Chinese restaurant that doesn't seem to speak English that well. They'll still be able to accept Dine and Discover. They just take out their phone, scan it, boom,
Yeah,
done.
because it's all multilingual as well.
It's all totally.
It's really impressive, especially in New South Wales government
Great.
is extremely advanced when it comes to that.
Yeah,
And if you haven't learned it yet, the ATO is also very advanced, the Australian Tax Office.
right.
So,
You can do it online. Can you imagine, Ade? I spent
Oh my
$400
God.
on an accountant to do my U.S. taxes, and I haven't lived in the U.S. for 8 years. It's horrible.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's actually just insane and criminal. Yeah, I don't want to get into that.
Yeah, no. But so Duco, so I don't know, how does Australian, just from that My New South Wales, what do you think about that? Is the My New South Wales, is MyGov the next super app? I don't know. Maybe I'm getting a little off topic from Web3
I
and
was
your
wondering when you
stories.
get to the topic of super apps.
Maybe I'm pushing my super app angle too hard.
It's like you wrote a book on it or something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
oh,
maybe I'm pushing
geez.
it too hard. But it's like, do you see those things as kind of anywhere feature parity or like anywhere feature relevant to what WeChat did? One, and then two, do you see the Australian government is doing some amazing, like, is that just do you think they're going to be doing more things in Web3 and other things?
Well, maybe I'll start with number two.
Yeah,
And I think when you say Australian government, it really depends on your definition. Namely, is that the Commonwealth, the federal government, or is that
the
the
Queen.
state?
Is it the
Right?
Queen?
Or is it the Queen?
Yeah, the Queen.
Um,
Queen.
so in this
The
case,
Queenies.
I think the New South Wales government is extremely advanced, and so is the federal government in certain ways. But I think particularly the New South Wales government has made some really good, has done a really good job when it comes to their Service New South Wales app and services. When it comes to how are they setting up a super app? I don't know. What's your definition of a super app?
It's an app. My definition is an app
You
that
asked the right question.
everyone's using to do everything. But
Okay.
it's a lame definition. But it's just the idea is that a lot of people are using it to do a lot of different things. And
I mean, I
yeah,
guess you could define it as such then,
yeah.
because
It has
like
aspects. It definitely has aspects.
yeah,
It at least has
because you use
the
it to
government
check in.
services.
You check into previously you check into restaurants and such from a COVID point of view, right? You have to check in.
That's just a quick time on that because I have all my American friends had no idea what I was talking about.
Okay,
So just to even, can you explain what that is? Because in the United States, some of my friends listening, they don't even know. They go, yeah, a few restaurants require you to check in. They each have their own website.
Oh wow, okay,
Like
yeah. So,
it's like someone sets up a
Oh my
website to track
goodness.
their individual government company or their individual restaurant. Stone Throws Cafe, Stone Throw Brewery has a website to track their guests. Something, yeah. So,
well, here because of the no COVID policy, essentially, the government wanted to track everyone's movements and to make sure that if someone got sick, that they could notify everyone automatically, like, hey, someone that was sick, that was diagnosed with COVID, visited your premise. And anyone that was there at that time, as well as the owner of that restaurant or whatever premise it was, then gets notified and then has to follow certain procedures, right? Depending on where we were in that sort of COVID time. So if you wanted to enter any type of establishment, you had to scan a QR code using your phone, using the New South Wales app. It scans the QR code and then logs that you were there at that time, so that anyone or the government, only the government, would actually know that you were there and could then, notify anyone. So everywhere you go, you check in, and then you'd usually check out. I forgot that 90% of the time. And every
yeah,
now and then,
totally same. And they'd have auto checkout after like 2 hours or something.
supposedly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then if you were there at the same time as someone that tested COVID positive, you get a notification saying, hey, you were in the same premise as someone that was positive at this time. If you are showing any symptoms, please stay home. Or in the early days, it was like stay home and isolate.
Right.
And nowadays, nobody really uses it anymore. But towards the end, it was like, hey, someone was there, check for symptoms. If you have any symptoms, stay home. If not, just carry on.
My friends in the U.S., I tell them the system that Australia has, and they are just so flabbergasted. They're like,
It's good. I think it was developed by BCG, actually.
It's incredible. It's really well done. They had originally, Australia came up with this COVID ID, like COVID tracing app, and that really didn't work. That didn't work. But this, like the New South Wales, or like the thing about every restaurant you go to, you scan in. It's just contact tracing. You scan in, and even like you said so many times, like you go into the supermarket and then you forget to scan out, so then you're like, it says you're there for 5 hours or something. But then you get a notification.
What were you buying?
What was he doing in the supermarket for 5 hours? No, but then you get a notification and saying you are a close contact. You because of the contact tracing, and then they direct you to official government information of what you are allowed to do, and it's all really clear of
That's
what
nice.
you're expected to do. Like, okay, you are a close contact. Isolate for 3 days and monitor symptoms, or like get a test, and if you test negative, you're and like wait 3 days and then you're okay. But it was all just, everything is just so clear, and it all comes from this national government standpoint or the New South Wales government standpoint, and it's all really clear. And I talked to my friends in the US, and it's like every restaurant is making their own rules. It is the epitome of decentralization and confusion and chaos. It's like, and all of them are just, so many of my friends were like, I'm just not going outside because no one cares. Like, and then it just all gets ridiculous.
Yeah, that's insane. I mean, that's basically what China did as well.
Yeah.
So but it was all integrated into WeChat,
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, we're still doing it. Like we're still, every time you go to the metro, you go into any mall, you go into any building, you gotta check in.
All right.
Yeah, it's because you guys still have that zero COVID policy, whereas
Yep. Yeah.
that's no longer the case here.
Okay, so I went out on a big tangent, and I'm leaving Duco's expertise as a business model starter. It feels like he can just turn anything into a business or business model, incubator, NFT, little Kimmy's. Why don't you, Ade? What question would you have for him? Bring us back on course.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we did touch on it briefly, but a lot of times we're getting into conversations a lot with people who are skeptical of Web3 and crypto, especially in the downturn. And
Sorry, one more time.
Ade, you need to repeat your question.
all right, so yeah, I was saying that we
No.
just touched on it. We just touched on it briefly, but I wanted to kind of bring it
Okay,
back
we can hear you
to
now.
crypto. Yeah, where the any of us who are involved in crypto or who go to crypto meetups or whatever, we get a lot of questions like, is it all over? Is the downturn the end? Like, what does it mean that we've lost 60% or even 90% of the value in the market? So my question is, from your perspective, where do you see the value, and what is there to invest in now that sort of the bubble has burst, or at least
Mm,
partially burst?
Yeah, so I think, and I talked to a bunch of investors in this space, right? Web3 investors, and from the US, from Asia, from Australia. And I think generally the consensus is that it's probably going to get a little bit worse before it gets better.
right.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and that is not just crypto related, it's because of the macroeconomic situation that we're in, right?
Inflation.
Rising interest rates
Mm,
um, and just more uncertainty and potential wars, and who knows what the hell is going on. Um, um, the first thing that people would sell is this crypto stuff, right? Because it's the riskiest asset.
Yeah.
So I think, or not what I think, but what most investors are saying is, keep enough money in the bank for the next two to 3 years to survive this long crypto winter. So
right.
that's one. Now, have we reached the bottom? It depends on who you talk to. Some people say yes, some people say no. I have no idea, right? I personally am sort of being quite conservative here and preparing for the worst.
Yeah.
Because I think it's really difficult to bet on a winner right now. And ideally, I wait a little bit. And what was that saying? What did Buffett say? When the tide goes out, that's when you see who's left standing, I think. And that's,
Yeah.
the tide is going out, but we're not there yet.
Mm,
So I think in say the next 6 months, we'll have a better idea of where we're at.
mm,
Is this the end of crypto? No. I think the technology itself is useful, but is this the end of massive speculation? Probably for now, right?
mm.
But if you give people an opportunity to speculate, they will speculate. I don't think that's ever going to change. I mean, you see the same in
Yeah.
stock markets and startup investing and all that sort of jazz, right? Like it's just that it's made very easy in crypto, and real money has been made in that space. But
For sure.
what I'm seeing is that a lot of the interest has dried up because the quick money has dried up.
Right.
So is that a bad thing, though, with all these speculators going out? Probably not. Do you therefore see a massive drop in value? Absolutely.
Mm,
Is it going to get worse? Probably. But who knows for certain, really? I thought the whole market was going to crash as a result of COVID. Well, instead,
Yeah.
everything's gone up. So don't trust me, right? But but I think it's got some interesting applications, and this whole zero proof stuff about sharing information without actually sharing who you are.
right.
Mm-hmm.
I think is fascinating. The fact that it can offer provenance is fascinating. So history can no longer be rewritten,
Mm,
right? If it's immutable proof or records on the blockchain, that's a good thing. So there's some real interesting, and the smart contract functionality I think is interesting, and particularly so in fields like insurance, parametric
Mhm.
insurance, in countries where people may not trust institutions and organizations like we do in, say, the US and Australia. We know that if we have an insurance and I wreck my car or whatever, I'll get a payout. Whereas in many countries,
Yeah.
people don't have that faith in those systems, right?
Right.
I think there's some real interesting applications, but it's early days, and I am still quite skeptical of many of these sort of financial engineered protocols and funny business, really, which is just financial engineering. But I'm quite excited as well about the more useful applications. And
Totally.
listening to, for instance, the Australian Stock Exchange, they believe, not officially, but some of the folks that I speak to there, they truly believe that a lot of records are going to become NFTs in the future. It's going to be a background technology that nobody cares about,
Right.
but it's just a superior alternative to what we
Right.
have in normal databases.
Yeah. I've been listening to some podcasts like Bankless, and
Ah,
just
yeah.
a general sentiment from a lot of the big people in Web3, heavy Web3 enthusiasts like Polygon and Ethereum. They kind of just see, like you said, the tide going out. They kind of see it as, okay, good, we're getting the non-serious people are leaving. They are leaving the Web3 space. I know when here in Australia, again, I just have very little business interactions, and I had a few interactions with two people that I knew invested in crypto. And I asked them, okay, so what do you know about cryptocurrencies and blockchain? And they're like, oh, it's a game. Oh, crypto is a
Really?
game where you try to buy it where it's low and then try to sell it when it's high. Like for them, it's just like they had
That's
zero. Both
interesting.
of them had zero conceptual, and I'm being brutal on them, and that's why I'm going to leave them unnamed. But I could tell that they had zero conceptual understanding of these cryptocurrencies, but they just purely saw it as gambling. Actually, one of them actually thought it was just gambling. She did not understand that it wasn't. I was like, no, this is new technology and this thing behind. She goes, no, 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 this is just a game. You just buy these things, and then they go up, and then you sell them, and it's a fun game. Um,
It's
That's
fun
really
until they
interesting.
stop going up.
yeah, and I was like, yeah, it's something completely different for me. And so for me, when I'm very much on par with kind of what Dugo's saying. For me, and I listen to these enthusiasts, and that really resonates with me. With these big downturns of crypto and then a big downturn of NFT, my interest in Web3 is completely unaffected. I'm like, yeah, that's just the speculators jumping in and out. Like the technology does the same thing. The values that it provides is the same. And
But don't you think it's a little bit overblown though? Because I feel like the whole world sort of said Web3 is going to change the fabric of society, and you have all these purists that truly believe in that and say decentralization is everything, and the web is going to look completely different, and all this sort of stuff. It's moving away from the institutions, moving away from governments. Who needs banks, right? There's this whole
Right.
sort of ideological purist movement that's behind it, and then there's all the betters and the gamblers, um, and then there's the techie folks. I think it's a little bit overblown.
yeah,
I think it's got some really interesting applications, but like AI, that says that supposedly we should all be out of jobs by now already if we would have believed the articles 5 years ago. Um, yeah, it's a little bit more nuanced and not as life changing as we like to think it is.
I think it's like what you said. It's going to be technology in the background. I
Mm.
think I think Web3 is just going to be a series of new innovations in technology that is going to power the Web2 world.
Mm.
That's my kind of very realist look at it. And I just don't really see why that wouldn't be the case. I do think that with these new innovations, new businesses will come up and be created. Like
Mm.
when the smartphone
Yeah.
came out, um, a lot of companies, Facebook as an example, adapted to the smartphone.
Yeah.
Um, but new companies also were good at taking advantage of this new technology. I think like Instagram is probably an example of smartphones and optimizing for that faster than Facebook could, and then kind of creating new business models around it because this new technology and new this new technology has created new user experiences and new new models could be created by the combination of mobility, smartphone, camera, etc. But yeah, I just think I completely agree. I think it's gonna. I like on Bankless they call it the Web3 mullet. It's gonna be like Web2 in the front, Web3 in the back. Business in the front, party in the back. Where it's, I think the mullet is a weird way to put it. It just is funny because in Australia mullets have come back.
Oh
If
yeah,
you, yeah, in a big way. Mullets
the
are
rat
really big
tails and
here.
everything.
Oh man, it's massive. But it's all in I did a lot of studying of Web 1, and they thought that was going to tear down national governments and or tear down the nation states, tear down geographies. Everyone would just become this libertarian, egalitarian society of everyone on having access to the internet. Um, and you couldn't put nation state on the internet, and that obviously isn't the case in our podcast, The Great Fire Chat. A play on words of the Great Firewall is kind of a case in point of that. It's all, and by the way, it's all in my book. I plug so hard, man, on my own
You got
podcast.
to. You got
I'm
to.
ruining my own podcast. This is inundating the podcast. Sorry, Adi, I got another question for Duco. The digital collectibles, China's rebranding as digital collectibles, just kind of bringing a little bit of more current events into here. What is up with that? Why is that happening? Does that make sense?
I think they sort of blocked decentralized chains some time ago already. And I
Right.
think it's the way I look at it, and I'm actually more curious to hear your opinions on it.
Yeah, cool.
But obviously that allows them control, right? And also that removes the potential cross-border transactions of value, which is something they'd rather avoid as well. I think, but also China has had a bit of a bad history in stock market gambling, right? And had to bail out the market a couple of times while I was living there.
Yeah.
So I think to protect the harmonious society of China, I think it makes sense for them to stick to their guns and say, yeah, we don't want this to be another crazy, weird asset class that people can start betting on, which may actually destabilize the harmony that we've so carefully created. So I think it just fits with what they're doing, and there's something to be said about it. So yeah, I think I haven't looked into it enough, but it seems to be quite congruent with their previous strategy. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, your intuition is right on. It basically is, it's the natural, it's the result of the regulations that they put in place earlier. You can't have something decentralized. You can't have something that's speculative. And so as an industry, the big tech companies who were trying to get on the NFT train. So there's a very brief period in time when Meta rebranded, when Facebook rebranded to Meta, and NFTs were kind of all the hype. There was this huge push to kind of like pitch the metaverse, to pitch NFTs as a branding opportunity. I just saw a pitch deck the other day about, sort of a safe way to use NFTs for branding purposes, which I thought was very interesting. And so they decided to rename them as digital collectibles because they're not NFTs, and they really aren't. I mean, they're almost completely not like NFTs because they're not on a common blockchain. They're not resellable, and so they really are just kind of like digital tokens that you can display on your phone. And of course, a lot of their usefulness then goes away. So, why would you invest in something if you're not going to be able to sell it for more later, which is the whole point of a collectible in many ways. So, so Tencent actually, they launched a digital collectible platform, and then they took it back down after a year because once they realized that the secondary market wasn't going to be there, the business model just dried up. So
Right.
I think we're going to see a lot of that. There is definitely still some NFT marketing going on. There's a huge tea chain called Nanyuki. I don't know. I think it probably is only been in the last 2 years. I mean, they've just exploded. There's like it's like, kind of a Starbucks kind of thing where there's just a shop in every one of their shops is in every mall, every other street corner, selling milk tea and lemon tea and all that stuff.
Right.
Um, and and they had a whole branding campaign with their app, so you could order from the app, you could buy a specific cup that had they partnered with one of the hot movies or TV shows on Tencent Video. So there was like this really hot drama on Tencent Video that everyone was watching, and they did an IP collaboration, so you could buy a cup. That just the only difference was that the cup had a character from the TV show, and apparently it became so popular um, that you had to wait in line for like 3 hours to get a cup of tea with that cup.
Right. Oh my gosh.
And it was all based on this idea of like, you buy the cup using the Nanyuki app, you get like a little digital collectible, you get a collectible cup, and it's like, the current hot TV show that's going to probably nobody's going to have even remember in 3 months.
Right.
um, but it was wildly successful as a branding move, as a branding opportunity. So it's interesting to see how that develops and where that goes.
Yeah.
My little spin on it, a less sophisticated spin on all of this and the NFTs being rebranded as digital collectibles in China is I like taking out the speculation from a lot of this, because I think the speculation is what's confusing the market and confusing the technology. Because NFTs, it's like, okay, it's a unique identifier code locking into the blockchain, making it immutable, and then you're able to do things with it. But then you add speculation into it, and then it's just gambling. And then I'm talking to people and they think NFT means gambling, and they just get really confused by what the technology actually is. They don't need to be the same. They can be really different. And I like they rebrand them as digital collectibles. They're they're redefining it as the use case
Yeah.
rather than what it is, because what it is just too confusing. So they're like, the use case is digital collectibles, because you could use
That's an interesting
NFTs.
way to put it.
Yeah, you could use NFTs in like supply chain and like tracking things. Let's just call it digital collectibles as the primary use case that makes the most sense, and just put that as the new name. And in Chinese is really nice, because things normally have very clear meaning, and that's why I love learning Chinese so much, because sometimes I learn the Chinese word of something and it actually helps me understand the English word. Like Maoduin, contradiction is Maoduin is like, it's like spear and shield. They counter each other. I love those things. And they're like, let's just give it an actual meaning rather than NFT, because it just is like this weird and scary acronym, and then you understand the English and then it still doesn't really make sense. So I like the rebranding. I feel like it's another part of removing the hype from this Web3 world that is kind of inundated with hype and plagued by it. So,
Yeah.
Duca, you got any last questions for us? It's been really great having you on.
Any last questions for you guys?
For us, yeah, was switching the interview around, because it was kind of funny you being like, you want to know what we think of that.
When are you going to be on TV about your book, talking about your book?
Great
Actually,
question.
that's a great question, because it means that I'm going to be back in Sydney, and if you're around for coffee, I'd love to do it again.
Yeah.
I actually have to admit, I went to Sydney 2 weeks ago and I didn't meet up with you. I met up with investors, and I hope they're not listening. They just weren't as cool. They weren't as cool. But yeah, I'm going to be August 17th. Interview.
August 17th.
Yeah, interview with Bloomberg. So let's get that
scheduled.
All right.
Very
Bloomberg
nice.
TV, baby. We'll see. Okay, if we're talking about me and my book, I got my first not 5-star rating on Amazon, which means it's the first person that's not one
It's
of
not
my
your
friends
mom.
or family. Yeah, not my mom, brother, or sister. And I'm like, it's
Like
my
your cousin
first
that
real
hates you.
review. It was, there's a part of me, oh no, I got a bad review. But then I go, oh my gosh, I got an actual review. This is my first actual
Someone
review.
actually bought
Yeah,
it and
so,
read it. Yeah,
but
that's
they,
amazing.
unfortunately, they didn't leave any words because I would have loved to see
Oh,
why they give it
Ah.
a
yeah.
3-star. But maybe they just like, this is an average book. But hey, I got a review.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
cool.
that's not bad.
Yeah. It's a good problem. It's a good problem. So,
But you also just
Yeah.
have readers that are like, I'm just going to give you 4 stars because I don't like China.
yeah. Oh,
Oh, but
totally.
one
Yeah,
star.
yeah,
Those readers are going to
yeah.
say.
This guy's a communist. This
Yeah.
guy's a
Yeah,
communist.
let's hope they don't get a
One-star for
hold
communists.
of the book. Actually,
All right, well,
Cool.
Zuko, it's so nice having you on. Really fun
Likewise.
chatting. We might have you on again at some point, and
Love to.
we'll do
yeah,
less
it was great
history,
interviewing.
but more just business models because you got some fun thoughts on all these. And I feel like you're one of those guys that can just cut through the crap really quickly. So
I
I
try
really like.
to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you cut through the crap very like a knife.
lovely to meet you.
Yeah, you
Absolutely.
too, man.
Thanks so much for
Yeah.
coming on, Duco. Okay, see ya.